A disaster at Newark Airport as 2-year-old toddler gets lost on luggage conveyor belt. A heart-stopping moment unfolded last Wednesday at Newark Liberty International Airport when a 2-year-old boy from a Staten Island vanished from his mother's sight only to be carried away on a luggage conveyor belt. Now let's get into the story, how it happened on this AI podcast.
Okay, let's just try and picture this. You're in a busy airport terminal. Chaos.
Yeah.
People everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow a 2-year-old kid isn't with their parent. They're actually riding away from them on a baggage conveyor belt.
It sounds, well, unbelievable, like something you'd make up for a movie scene.
Exactly.
But it apparently really happened just last week. Newark Liberty International Airport.
And look, the most important thing, absolutely, is that the toddler was okay. Totally unharmed.
Thank goodness.
But this incident, as bizarre as it is, feels like it's pointing to something, well, bigger than just one strange story. You sent over quite a bit of material articles, reports.
Right, analyses.
And when you start digging into them, this moment, the kid on the belt, it feels less like some random freak thing and maybe more like a symptom.
I think that's fair. We've looked through all that source material you mentioned, really focusing on the recent issues, the safety concerns at Newark specifically. So our mission here in this deep dive is to kind of use this really shocking event, and frankly a few others the sources detail, to try and unpack what is actually going on over there. What does it tell us about the bigger picture?
Okay, let's unpack this then. So that core incident first. Sources say last Wednesday, Terminal A, a mother's talking to a JetBlue employee. Missed flight situation.
Right, yeah. And just in that, that moment your attention is diverted, her 2-year-old son from Staten Island apparently slipped away.
Just vanished.
Yeah.
And not into the crowd, but somehow he got onto one of those low conveyor belts.
Yeah.
For checked bags.
The one's right at check-in height.
And
so.
boom, he's just whisked away, disappears behind the counter, behind the scenes.
Which, honestly, that's maybe the most terrifying aspect. This wasn't just a little joyride. The belt took him deeper into the airport system, dropped him down a chute, apparently, right into the lower level area where they screen the luggage.
And the descriptions of that area, it sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
Sharp turns, automated equipment, x-ray machines everywhere. It's built for suitcases, definitely not toddlers.
Precisely. Bags, not babies. That's where, thankfully, 2 Port Authority police officers got the alert.
Okay.
And the sources really emphasize how fast they acted, jumping into that whole maze of belts and machinery.
Yeah, I saw that quote from Frank Conti from the Police Benevolent Association. Said the belts actually split, went different directions.
Yeah.
So the officers had to split up, too, to cover ground.
And thankfully, one of them spotted him. The source says he was right near an x-ray machine. The phrasing was just before he could enter it.
Wow. That close.
That close.
Yeah.
And the officer just scooped him up.
And the outcome, just incredibly, was that the toddler was fine, completely unharmed.
Amazing, really.
And the family, they actually managed to continue their trip later that day, flew to Tampa. So a really scary situation, but, a good ending.
A very fortunate ending. But like you said earlier, this one event, even though it ended okay, it does sort of point towards bigger things.
Yeah.
The sources really stress that the fact this could even happen.
Well, that's the alarming part, especially when you stack it up against all the other issues Newark seems to be facing lately.
It does feel like that. Like this almost surreal incident shines a harsh light on this growing reputation Newark seems to have gotten. You see it in the sources, travelers, even airport insiders, calling it a, quote, delay-plagued hellhole.
Yeah, that phrase pops up. And when you look at the specific problems the sources list out, it's more than just people being annoyed about waiting.
Oh, definitely. We're talking like constant delays, massive cancellations becoming almost normal.
Right.
Severe backups out on the tarmac, just a huge number of cancellations, leaving people totally stranded and understandably pretty angry.
And then there are these really critical system failures. The sources mentioned one back on April 28th, a radar and communications blackout. Yeah, 90 seconds. 90 seconds of reportedly total silence.
Which is terrifying.
In probably the busiest airspace in the country.
Yeah.
Controllers had to rely just on looking out the window, basically.
Yeah.
Visual judgment.
Imagine the pressure. The sources actually note the impact on the staff was intense. 5 controllers apparently took a 45-day trauma leave after that.
Wow. Understandably.
And it gets, well, even more concerning maybe. The sources talk about serious safety concerns coming from inside the FAA.
Right, whistleblowers.
Whistleblowers, yeah. Reportedly warning travelers, basically saying don't fly out of Newark. And they're citing specific reasons: serious safety risks, staffing shortages.
That's a pretty stark warning coming from internal sources.
It is. And then you add other things like, remember that health scare just 2 weeks before the Toddler thing?
Oh, yeah, the measles exposure.
Exactly. New Jersey health officials flagged a potential measles exposure. An infected traveler had passed through Terminal B.
So another layer of concern for passengers.
And kind of underpinning some of this, there's ongoing construction. It's supposed to be upgrades long-term.
Right.
But the sources suggest right now it's just adding to the chaos. And get this, including power outages in control towers.
Wait, power outages in the control towers?
Well, more than once, apparently. Endangering operations.
Okay, so let's recap that list. Delays and cancellations galore. Critical systems like radar going dark. Internal FAA safety warnings. Health scares. Construction chaos causing power cuts in vital areas.
Yeah, it paints a pretty troubling picture of the operational state right now.
And it seems like aviation experts are starting to weigh in quite heavily.
They are. The sources point to some pretty strong calls for, well, significant change.
There's one expert they mentioned, Kyle Bailey, identified as a former FAA safety team member.
Right. His take, according to the sources, is basically that this needs more than just, fiddling around the edges. Quick fixes won't cut it. He says there's no silver bullet.
So what's his core diagnosis?
Looking at all these things together, the delays, the system stress, the near misses, his conclusion is pretty blunt. The airport simply cannot handle the current volume of flights.
Just too much traffic for the system.
That seems to be his assessment. Too many planes trying to use the existing infrastructure, and perhaps with the current staffing levels, it's overwhelming the system.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, too much volume, what's his proposed treatment?
Well, it's pretty bold, according to the sources. He suggests permanently cutting the number of daily flights.
Permanently reduce. Wow.
Yeah. And alongside that, push airlines to use larger aircraft. Fewer takeoffs and landings overall, but hopefully carrying roughly the same number of people.
Okay, so the idea is to ease the congestion, reduce the strain on air traffic control, on the runways, on everything.
That seems to be the logic, yeah.
Yeah.
Directly tackling that volume problem he identified.
The sources also mention a downside, right? A potential headache.
Right, because if you cut the number of flights, even if planes are bigger, that probably means fewer options for you, the traveler, less choice in terms of timing, maybe destinations, potentially higher fares too. It's a trade-off.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. We started with that image, that really jarring image of the toddler on the baggage bump.
That's thankfully ended okay.
Which thankfully ended okay. But then we layered on all these reports of systemic issues. The constant grinding delays, the terrifying system blackouts where controllers are flying blind, essentially.
Those internal FAA warnings, which are quite chilling.
Right. The health scares, the construction problems, even power cuts hitting control towers. It's a lot.
It is, and the sources seem to suggest that while the Toddler incident itself was, a specific event with a happy ending, the fact that it could happen, the fact that a 2-year-old to get into that machinery, get lost in the system, get perilously close to things like an X-ray machine without anyone noticing immediately, that specific failure feels, connected.
It seems to highlight real gaps. Maybe in safety protocols, maybe oversight due to staffing, maybe just the sheer complexity of running such a high-volume operation when things aren't perfectly tuned.
Exactly, and it brings you right back to that question the source material raises, which is pretty provocative. If a 2-year-old can slip through the cracks and disappear into the guts of a major U.S. airport,
Then what else is slipping through the cracks?
precisely, it really makes you think about these huge, complex systems we depend on all the time, doesn't it? Air travel, but other things too.
Yeah, it does. So we've done a deep dive today into the source material, starting with that unbelievable incident, linking it to this whole cascade of reported problems at Newark Liberty.
Delays, blackouts, warnings, health issues, construction woes.
And looking at that expert analysis, which points squarely at flight volume being the core issue, demanding pretty drastic solutions.
And maybe the final thought to leave you with, pulling all this together from the sources is just considering that trust we place in these incredibly complex systems that move us around, and maybe reflecting on what level of risk we're, perhaps without even realizing it, accepting as the price for all this modern convenience and capacity. Definitely something to ponder next time you're, navigating a busy airport.
How do you think airport security and design should change to prevent incidents like this toddler being swept away on a conveyor belt? Commented. Thanks.